Hey fellas, wanna see me talk about Helluva again? So, I've been biding my time, making shorts, talking about the positives and negatives about the series that I've got a love and hate relationship with. I can't fully say I dislike the series, nor can I say I truly love it, because it gives me a mixed bag of feelings at times and makes me grapple with my thoughts about it with the characters. It's never a present battle within me because I want to like the show since it has a lot of stellar designs to it, but a lot of its weakness lies in its writing. So today we're going to take a look at the show and really talk about some of the major issues that I've had with it, and to make it clear, at the time of me scripting this video, the latest episode was Unhappy Campers. I may add something if another episode comes out, I'll add this section to the script, but in any case, I'm MangaKamen, and let's begin.
Oh, I think I got Whiplash.
We gotta go back to the future. About 4 years ago since we got the pilot for the show. In it, we were introduced to the concept of a ragtag team of imps and one hellhound who are trying to make it in the world of hell by going to the human world and murdering people for the sinners of hell just to make some money. It's a concept that one can say isn't exactly commonplace, and has a fair bit of originality to it. Throw in the fact you have characters who are demons who don't exactly need to be good people. I mean, part of the excuse is that they are in hell.
The hell bees shot, you fucking really can't say that word anymore.
We'll get to that later. But yeah, it's an idea that hasn't really been done before in the animated media, at least not to this level or scale. And for the most part, for Season 1, we managed to keep to that aspect, with the imps going to the human world for their job a few times. With some incidents here and there, you at least had half of the first season at least dedicated to the original premise, with some more personal episodes for the characters sprinkled in as well. It gave a pretty nice blend, and while some of the episodes weren't always slam dunks or had a lot of missed opportunities, at least in my opinion, they were for the most part very enjoyable and still maintained the core elements of the show that were displayed in the pilot. Now there's something we need to talk about, and that's that there are different kinds of pilots. There's proof of concept, backdoor, premise, test run, and I think you get the point. From my point of view, I can see the pilot for Helluva to be a premise pilot, changes between the pilot and the actual series. Considering that the only big changes were some background changes in voice actors, meanwhile the lore, the world, and the characters mostly remained the same. Well, it's because slowly over the course of the first and became a lot more prominent in the second season, there's been a shift of the plot. There's been a lot more focus on the relationship between Blitz and Stolas, who the latter was essentially just a gag in the pilot.
I want to choke on that red of yours, your and lick all of your.
Do you kiss your mother with that mouth?
To make it clear, I'm not saying that the change from the pilot is a bad thing. Most pilots and the actual show have a lot of clear differences, but if we're still having the same characters, the same basic plot, and other such elements, then it's not too far of a stretch to assume that the pilot would be representative of the main series. If you want an example of a pilot that's different from the main series, just look towards the iconic Seinfeld. The pilot didn't have Elaine in it, Kramer's name was Kessler, and the show was called The Seinfeld Chronicles. In contrast, Helluva retains the same name, the character names, the setting, and the premise of the show. I bring this up to say that just because it was a pilot, that doesn't mean it didn't give an idea of what to expect from the show for viewers of it, which was to watch this group of 4 characters trying to survive their business of going up to the human world and killing people. But slowly the show's becoming more and more focused on the relationship between Blitz and Stolas, and while there are times where going to the human world to kill a bastard or two is the main focus of some episodes, I can't deny there's been a bit of a focus shift. Let's take a moment and point out the episodes where we focused on the concept of going up to the human world and killing people. This episode had 3 to 4 episodes that have focused on this concept, while the other 4 had more personal stories with the cast. I say 4 and not 5 because the 8th episode didn't come out until a few episodes of the second season because it was a direct sequel to the 7th episode. That's a decent blend, and one can argue that Truth Seekers had a related premise with IMP being in the human world and their actions were being captured. At the current season, we only have 1 episode that is actually related to the premise, with the other 4 being more character-focused and further from what we were introduced in the pilot. There's nothing wrong with there being more character-focused with your stories, especially when you have a series that is episodic with a more traditionally linear story happening in the background. However, the problem is that the focus is transferring more and more into the relationship between Stolas and Blitz, and if you've ever seen one of my videos before the subject, you know I'm not a huge fan of the Twig Boys. And if you're like me, and why wouldn't you, because I'm one of the most amazing men in the world, stay thirsty, my friends. You weren't exactly signing on for such a prominent romance story between two horrible people. You can probably handwave all this away and say that this is a preference that I'm stating, and sure, I suppose, although I don't know why you weren't expecting me to bring up my opinions. It's my channel and my video, I kinda make a living off this. I see this as an issue for a number of reasons, one of which is the detriment to the rest of the characters who aren't Blitz and Stolas.
What are you doing on the computer? Go outside, so beautiful!
You really can have a narrative without your characters, so having a strong cast of them is kinda necessary to tell a story. Like, duh. And Helluva Boss can throw some curveballs here and there, and some not so well. You've got characters like Blitz, Stolas, and Moxie, who are given a lot of development. Some of it good, some of it not so good. It's just plain repetitious, and at times, overbearing. Meanwhile, the more prominent women characters of the show are often regulated with the least development or are used as tools with the main characters. Yep, we're going more in depth with this reasoning here, where Helluva Boss made its story more focused on the male characters, meanwhile Hazbin Hotel focuses on the women. Now, aside from the point I made in my short about this, how even if you have a specific demographic-focused story, that doesn't mean you have to neglect the other characters. There have been a ton of male-based pieces of entertainment media that have a lot of developed female characters. Not to mention, if we were just to focus on the shows themselves, like Hazbin's pilot, a lot of the male characters did get a fair bit of characterization in it. I bring this up not to attack VivziePop, but rather to address the criticism that's been prevalent ever since these tweets were made. And to express my issues, I need to address this elephant in the room. So let's start off with Stella. The issue I have is the simplification of her writing in the show. I'm not gonna say that in season 2, where she's shown to be a psycho bitch abuser, that it completely contradicts the first season, but rather my issue is that the moral gray was taken away and the path was pretty much the safest route. For those unaware, in the first season, the conflict with Stolas and Stella was ignited by Stolas cheating on his wife with Blitz. So you had a woman who was scorned who had a legit reason to be pissed off at her husband. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've had my heart broken before by cheating, and it sucks. But with her just being a full-blown bitch and effectively making Stolas' actions pretty much justified and giving him the victim feat, it completely robs any actual nuance from the situation and just makes Stella into a one-note character. Oh, she's a bitch! Hooray! I have to reiterate that I don't think this is straight up contradicting from the writing of Season 1 to Season 2. It really feels like an afterthought though, since the scenes we saw involving Stella only showed a woman scorned by cheating. If you want my thoughts, I think we should have seen elements of her abusive nature in the first season. The show is not above using flashbacks, so something like that would have made the choice just to make her abusiveness a lot more cohesive. Be a lot more cohesive going into the second season. When you have the evidence of the abuse in the season afterwards, it comes off a bit more like an afterthought. And again, this makes Stella into a prop just to make Stolas into a sympathetic character. She's just meant to be a screeching, classist harpy that we're supposed to hate. Hell, we don't even know what her relationship is like with Loctavia. Another character is used to help develop Stolas. I'm not saying you can't have one-note characters being used to help further development of another character. I often watch Yu-Gi-Oh! Where a lot of the characters in the dub tend to be a bit known for their voices rather than their characterization.
That's right, Poopyhead! My mommy says I'm really strong!
We got to prove ourselves to the boss, dog. Then she'll be giving us some mad respect, know what I'm saying?
Boobies.
However, these characters are often just one-offs who don't really have much of a connection to the main characters in prominent roles. It's why you can get away with a character having an imitation of Christopher Walken used for a personality. But when you have a character who does have a prominent connection to who is now supposedly a main character whose backstory and other relationships are near non-existent, say for one out-of-context picture, this isn't the greatest writing choice. And the same can be said about Octavia, who's mostly characterized as Stolas' daughter, and that's pretty much it. It's almost a running joke that I've seen when it comes to criticism of Millie's character, where she's pretty much known to be Moxie's wife. Even in the latest episode of Unhappy Cappers, while we did get a little bit of characterization for her, it not only gets a bit overshadowed by Moxie's, behavior.
Oh, everybody look at me. I'm the greatest. It's plain to see that all you lose. I hate it.
But also feels hollow. We're supposed to believe that it's an insecurity, at least that's what the nice people with torches and pitchforks were telling me in my video comments sections. How she wants to be appreciated, and that her insecurities branch from her family, blah 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 blah. Here's the rub though. Millie's never shown to actually have validation issues until this episode. She's more often portrayed as the badass of the group, killing giant monsters and ripping mobster sharks into pieces. She knows she's impressive. Hell, there's a reason she can't compete in the festivities in the Harvest Moon episode.
You know you get too carried away. The last competition ended in 15 separate funerals.
But I only caused 9 of them.
If they were going to do this validation issue, there need to be more setup for it. And I hope that sounded familiar because it's a similar issue to that of Stella's abusive nature. The show has a fair bit of issue with setup and payoff, and will often have to backtrack in order to have things make sense. One such example would be how Stolas and Blitz basically ignored all that drama from Aussies, and it was shoved away in a text message at the end of another episode.
What the fuck am I reading?
That is not good writing. I stated that I'm not a huge fan of this couple, and this is one of the reasons. Since you had the potential to really have a powerful scene between Blitz and Stolas, who at the end of Aussies had essentially had a big snafu in their already messed up relationship. Blitz laid his grievances to Stolas, saying that Stolas viewed the imp as nothing more than a plaything for sexual gratification, and Stolas was left alone after being publicly humiliated. The next time the two characters meet in the current time period, they act like nothing happened. Let's face it, this text message is nothing more than a means to corrupt the issue in the writing. Even more so because it was a blink and you'll miss it moment, cramming any of the emotional tension and potential for any strong scenes into it as well. And even if they retroactively made a flashback to show that they actually talk about what happened, it'd still be an issue because it's still post factum remedying an issue that the show created in the first place by skipping it. Of course, there are other characters that have their issues. Loona's character I've praised and criticized almost evenly at this point. One point of contention that I have is basically her acting all kind and caring about Blitz when he's nursing a hangover after the Aussie incident, and then in Seeing Stars, the episode canonically after this one.
Sorry, I'll never replace you no matter what you do.
You're good.
Even to this day, people are saying that this is a joke and that we're not supposed to take this seriously. Well, not only has Loona not been this abusive to her adoptive father, but that also undercuts the speech that Loona was given to Octavia about how fathers are trying their best, even if they screw up. It hurts the characterization of the Hellhound. Now, of course, the girls aren't the only characters who get undercut in this show. Moxie as a character continuously gets treated like the punching bag. For example, when he's confronting his father, threatening to kill his own blood in the process, it gets kneecapped.
You gotta be fucking kidding.
Even Moxie's father, Crimson, falls limp. We're supposed to have a sense of tension and fear from this mafioso. We're supposed to see him as a threat, but he's also shown to be an idiot because he's fooled into believing that another dummy has money because he rented a suit, and Crimson is also undercut by the fact that he installed dildos in his house. It's tonal and characterization whiplash where we're supposed to take him as a threat and then as a joke at the same time.
For fuck's sake!
But because of clashing tones with his character, you really can't take him as either because it causes a stumble of how I viewed the character and in turn the situation.
Just because it's a dramatic scene doesn't mean you can't do a little comedy in the background. Throw a pie or two, for God's sake.
The only difference between that and this scene above is that it directly tied into what Crimson is trying to do as a character and isn't in the background. Because here's the thing when it comes to comedic-based shows, even though its basis is in comedy, if you're trying to establish a villainous character, you want to have them keep a consistent tone, otherwise you basically blow the knees out on me taking them seriously. And even then, Futurama being a comedic show still had its serious and very impactful dramatic moments that weren't undercut by comedy. And this is something that has to be done regardless of your serious tone, which, funnily enough...
Oh, I think I got whiplash.
I'm not gonna lie, this is probably gonna be the most subjective part of the video. Comedy is pretty individualistic, and this is something you've heard a lot of people say when it comes to this aspect. Don't get me wrong, I do find some of the comedy pretty hit and miss, and some of it—
And local celebrity Millard Realboy caught incesting tonight, showcasing a sickening display onlookers deem.
Great. You owe me a TV, Tatiana.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, there's a lot of jokes I don't particularly care for in this series, and I'm sure there's someone out there who will tell me that finding Moxie acting like an over-stereotypical girl was enough cringe to make me age into my 80s that I'm overreacting. But fine, let's still consider that scene I brought up in the last portion of the last section, Crimson intimidating Moxie, and at the same time being so out of touch of not seeing the difference between bi and gay, and thinking stereotypical aspects of gay people with all the sex toys toys being strung around the mansion, and before someone in the comments dares bring it up, I happen to be openly bi. Have been for almost a year at this point. Yay me.
Did it. Good job. I can't believe it. I'm proud of you.
Side tangent aside, it's because of this tonal shift that makes it hard to understand, keeping up with unhappy campers, aside from the pure cringe that is Moxie's attempts at being a woman, almost borderline insulting. But hey, maybe I just don't know any theater kids. At least this thread confirms that this wasn't a Millie episode. The story is cut between a B plot and an A plot, with Moxie and Millie trying to find the killer of their current client, finding them, and then Moxie dicking around. We have the plot of Blitz trying to find his sister. I understand that the whole joke was Moxie just goes full into leadership mode and fails immediately, and it ends with an implied incest joke.
Oh! Ew! Dude! What the fuck?
I don't know, call me a prude all you like, but when a good portion of your comedy in the episode is cringe-inducing, that doesn't really give me a reason to like the rest of the jokes. Of course, if we want to get back to the story structure, Blitz searching for his sister, this comes out of nowhere, and part of the reason why I did my shorts on this series was to actually bait people into giving me explanations for why something the way it is in this show. One of the most prominent counterpoints is Blitz seeing his sister's picture in his phone at the end of episode 7, season 1. Yep. That's all it is. Unfortunately, when you have so much in the background, or have things such as the LA acid water you wouldn't know unless you paused and looked for a second on one specific message, that's not good foreshadowing. You see, if you want me to believe that Blitz was actually trying to break into a mental hospital to reconnect with his sister, you need to have scenes that establish that motivation. Not just him scrolling through his phone all the way back in season 1, and then about 6 episodes later, just now deciding to do something about it. Maybe pepper in some scenes of Blitz on his phone trying to reach out to his sister in other episodes throughout season 2. It's a technique called foreshadowing, because just showing a picture doesn't indicate anything about Blitz's relationship with Barbie. All it shows that he had a sister. You need to have scenes that show that Blitz is trying to make up relationships with those he cared about before the episode happens. Otherwise, it feels like a sucker punch when you just drop this on your audience. And I don't know about you guys, but I don't like being sucker punched. If you want characterization to actually have merit, you need to be able to establish what you want to happen in your story before you do it. Now, sticking with unhappy campers, when I saw Blitz breaking into the hospital, I thought he was trying to see Stolas after he got his shit pushed in the last episode, cause that was established. And yet, nope, that's not what happened. Let's look towards another scene in episode. Loona's speech to Octavia in Seeing Stars.
What you...
No, not that. Well, yeah, but that's not what I'm referring to at this point. It's the speech in and of itself, where we see Loona giving Octavia the idea of how fathers are trying. It's a message in a vacuum that works. However, with what we see in the show, doesn't really make a lot of sense. Loona and Blitz never really share a word about their problems, and if I was a more cynical jerk on the internet, I'd say that the show honestly tries to justify Loona's bad behavior towards Blitz, since she had a rough childhood. Hell, Blitz has this flashback showing this, and earlier in the episode, Blitz was trying to put his foot down on Loona's bad behavior. I am not a fan of Blitz, but he's not in the wrong for this. We don't get any actual scenes of Loona experiencing what she's telling Octavia. At best, we just get a scene where Blitz is trying to pick up Loona from a party. We don't get any opportunities to see Loona talk about herself, and this scene makes the Hellhound come off as a megaphone for the writers to say, "Oh, our characters are so great," without actually seeing what those great deeds were. Loona herself as a character feels hollow. We don't know where her insecurity comes from or why she feels the need to push Blitz away when he offers her a roof over her head, a job, or help her with any of her issues. And it's never explored. This is also for a lot of other characters. And in fact, if I had to be honest with how the story is structured, and if we look towards the past, the show actively says to me that we don't want their characters to grow, that the characters should be allowed to remain the same, that despite how their actions affect other characters. I've stated before, you don't need to have your characters grow if you're making an entertaining romp of a story where the goal is more the adventure and not the characters of themselves or their growth. However, when you have a more character-focused story, the point of the personalities is to see them grow and learn from what they experience. But rather than see that with Moxie, who doesn't really learn from his experiences, or Loona never sharing her insecurities, or Millie basically becoming a straight-up badass, these characters just essentially stay where they are when they're not supposed to. Hell, even arguably the two leads, Stolas and Blitz, barely get any of this. Stolas, who was initially presented as a side character, has arguably gotten the most development that was actually shown on screen to an extent, and I attribute this to the writing style, as it doesn't really help with the characters, neglecting to create establishing scenes that can help improve the delineation of the storytelling. That's really the issue with the writing style, not help sometimes that there's supplemental content that's expressed in outside material. I legit remember someone telling me that I need to check the characters' Instagrams for some story elements that weren't expressed in the show. Oh joy, that's proper storytelling.
That's sarcasm, Alfred. Mild teasing at best.
Honestly enough, the relationship between Stolas and Blitz is a big signifier of this. Yes, the main core of the story, the bond between the foul imp and sex-crazed owl. It started off with a toxic deal structure, with Stolas basically blackmailing Blitz for his sexual vices, and then retroactively made the two best friends for one day, at least 2 decades ago. And then one day was enough to last for years, through deception, through class differences, and distance. Despite all that, Stolas immediately began to beg Blitz to have his way with him at his wedding anniversary party. Excuse me? Again, this is a weakness of the story structure. You need to have more foundation for the characters for why they act this way. Otherwise, it makes me wonder if Stolas' life is so boring that he remembers one day from his childhood that was essentially over 2 decades ago. Obviously, I'm being hyperbolic because that's what a YouTuber does, but there should have been much more events between the two if you want me to really believe that the relationship is so strong.
So long, losers!
Uh-oh.
The top of his head is still showing. Claw at it!
I'm going to talk about some aspects of the show that I don't really have enough to make their own sections about, or are things that I find to be personal gripes, such as the world building and how some of it is conflicting and how it's addressed out of the show doesn't help. I touched on it slightly, but let's give a more specific example. Take Moxie's origins. In Harvest Moon Festival, we got this line.
Wrath, huh? My employees are from there. I've never really been. I hear it's full of inbred chuckle fucks.
But then in X's and O's,
I hate this place.
Oh yeah, this is your old stomping ground, isn't it, Mox?
So that was a fucking lie.
Now, some people got confused since this was conflicting information, and it got to the point that one of the writers had to clarify that while Moxie was indeed born in Wrath and his mom's from there, he was raised in Greed. Yeah, I don't know why it was so hard for people to understand that. Well, Straw Man, it's because that's conflicting information that wasn't actually expanded upon in the episode. Again, if I had to go to Twitter to find something that's confusing me for this show, that's not good writing. Speaking of Twitter, X, whatever the hell you want to call it nowadays, I want to touch on VivziePop's interactions with some users, and this in combination with what I just said going on with. I want to stress that I'm not aiming to send hate towards her or the Twitter user that I'm highlighting in the following, but it's something I need to point out. Loona thought she and Blitzo had reached a new understanding of each other following Queen Bee. He opened up to her. She called him dad. But only seems to have been a week or so later, he was, to her mind, ganging up on her and talking about having her being replaced. With Viv saying in response, the biggest thing lost was not being able to release an order was this. Regardless of how justified you see your reaction in SS, Loona was acting out a very deeply rooted anger and betrayal. This really hits the nail on the head. Alright. So, the dead commentator in me is screaming from beyond the grave, because how did Blitz gang up on Loona and talked about having her replaced?
Loona, honey, wait just a... Shit! Looney, please, can we talk... Fuck! I mean, wow, a good throw, honey. I'm so proud of you!
If I'm so terrible, how about you just grow a pair and replace me?
Okay, well, maybe I might.
What?
Maybe I will, little missy. Yeah, that's right. It's tough love time. So now you can go to your desk.
Oh, no. Somebody's going to get an email.
Right. Blitz getting his ass handed to him, and when Loona puts the ultimatum of her being replaced on the table, insulting Blitz on the way, he decides to roll with it. I don't condone her reaction, but it was incredibly insensitive of him and triggered her abandonment issues. She was beating his face in with paintings before he even said it. Hell, Blitz didn't even threaten to replace her until she suggested it. I feel like people either didn't watch the episode or are memory holding the beginning part, which is weird because there's a screenshot of the scene right after Loona beats up Blitz, the latter who was trying to give criticisms to Loona for his business. The issue here is that while there seems to be a bit of a patching up on the outside of the show and it's not even done by the writing staff, it's an interpretation from a fan, which, if I can be honest, comes off as more of excusing terrible behavior in the face of criticism. Again, I'm not trying to stoke hate towards the user or Vivian herself. I know what'll happen if I do that. My main complaint is that there is again outside sources being used to explain behavior of the personalities in the show or cover up some issues that people have had. Speaking of, I feel like there's a bit of an oddity that needs to be addressed, such as Buckzo in the first episode of Season 2. What's the point of having Blitz steal stuff from Paimon when he could have just gotten money legit selling his son? It's logical inconsistency. Or how about Octavia just walking about LA without a disguise, even though that was a pretty big deal in the first season? There's not even a possum excuse being used here.
Oh, crap!
Hey, remember when I brought up this earlier in the video?
The Hellbees shot, you fucking really can't say that word anymore.
This is a show that makes implied incest jokes, uses violence and abuse as comedy, tons of sex jokes, had a room full of dildos, but we gotta stop at using the R word.
That's okay, Meatwad. No one else will either.
Now, I'm not saying you have to use it. Hell, I say don't use it. But logically speaking, why would a demon care about using it or not? I get they're probably making fun of the fact that they can't say the word, otherwise they'll get slammed publicly for doing so on social media, but in that case, why even bring it up? There seems to be more and more villains and antagonists being introduced into the series, and then fading into the background. What's the plan here? Trying to make a Legion of Doom in the show?
I just want some pants. A decent pair of pants.
Heck, if you want to get into that into a more broader sense, it really feels like there's a lot more characters than there should be, and if previews are correct, we're getting an episode that's focused on the Fizzaroli. Now, I'm all for the idea of making the side cast more fleshed out, but you got a ton of characters in the main group who aren't really all that fleshed out or have conflicting depictions. So I just have to ask in big, bold letters, why? Bigger. Bigger, damn you!
The mission. The nightmares. Finally.
There's dicks in the walls. Oh, that's fucking hilarious.
Thanks, Mom.
I want to make it clear that my goal with this video isn't to attack Helluva Boss or tell you not to watch it. I'm mostly making this because I want to like the show, and it has its great moments. The last episode of Season 1 was really great in my opinion, and added a lot more to really make Season 1 shine. Well, it's certainly not perfect, but made up for quite a few of the issues I had with the first season. Cause if you've been around my channel for a while, you should know that I've had some issues with Season 1. Honestly, I'm not trying to put it on a pedestal just because of one episode that took a few years to come out. There are issues with Season 1, and aside from the quality of animation, to me there really hasn't been that much of an improvement from the first season. There were a ton of issues there, and a lot of people expressed them in videos and posts and everything else, but it really feels like this show didn't grow from any of the mistakes it made. I know that's probably harsh to say, but I like to be as honest as I can on this channel, and I want to like this show, I want to support it, I want to be able to enjoy it. And no, this isn't me saying that the show needs to capitulate to my demands. I don't think that's a good way to critically analyze anything or my right to impose what I want to on the creators of the show. But as someone with a decent YouTube following, a computer, a bottle of bourbon, and too much time on his hands, I'm allowed to voice my opinion, and I got this platform, so I might as well use it. I could have made this video about the creators and the issues that I've had with them publicly, but I try my best to separate art from the artist as best I can and judge the show on its own merits. I'm not gonna lie though, there does seem to be this wall around the show that you can't voice your opinion on it in a negative manner, even if it's done in good faith, not aiming to tear down the show or the creators. Sometimes, as I've shown, even the creators of the show will say things that will be used to dismiss people's criticisms, like how I demonstrated earlier with VisiPop saying the show is mostly male-focused. I don't bring this up to chastise, but rather to point out that there's been a suffocating air around the show, especially for critics. Oh well, in any case, I wish nothing but the best for the show, and I hope that the rest of the show does well. I'm MangaKamen, thanks for your time, for watching, and I think I'll go back to watching my Kamen Riders for now. Gotchard hit me hard. God, that's my jam! Oh, bye-bye!